Hi, everyone. Welcome to today's Career Chat. I'm Krista Harmon, a workforce development consultant with the Kent ISD, and I am so delighted to have Jessie Priestly with us today. She's a geneticist, a physician. We're looking forward to digging in. Hi, Jessie.
Hey, how are you?
I'm great. I love to start off career chats with taking you back to where some of our students are in their age to when you were 15 or 16. Did you think you grew up to be a geneticist or a doctor at that point even? Tell us what you were thinking.
I definitely didn't even know what a geneticist was, so no. I'm gonna share some things I put together real quick to help me tell this story.
Awesome.
Um,
And just for young people to know, it's normal not to know at that age what you want.
yeah.
One thing I love about career chats is we
this.
hear the variety of career paths.
Okay. Are you guys seeing my presenter mode or my?
We are seeing presenter mode.
Okay. How about now?
Now we are seeing the full screen. Thank you.
Beautiful. So I grew up in a really beautiful place called Dexter, Michigan. It's about, I don't know, 10 miles west of Ann Arbor, straight down I-94. It's famous for a bakery and a cider mill. And at the time, it was kind of rural, kind of like Rockford and Byron Center and Caledonia, and all of those places, much like Dexter, are less rural now. And I got good grades and I followed all the rules and I was pretty good at math and science. And so I think there were some thoughts that I could be a doctor or a dentist or a veterinarian. And as far as STEM career goes, like that was sort of the end of the STEM discussion. And I didn't do a lot of exploring. But I knew I really liked science. And so I applied to colleges kind of with a pre-med major in mind. And I applied to lots of places, but I ended up going to Michigan State and specifically to Lyman Briggs College. I chose Michigan State for not very smart reasons. I grew up outside of Ann Arbor. Lots of people from my high school were going to University of Michigan. My parents would have wanted me to live at home if I had gone to University of Michigan, and I decided, no, thank you. So Michigan State with in-state tuition was a really great choice for me and what my goals were. And Lyman Briggs is a residential natural science college. So what does that mean? In the same building that had my dorm rooms upstairs, where I lived with all my friends, I had all of my math and science classes in like the basement area. I had a cafeteria in the same place. And it made a really big university a much smaller place. So instead of having biology classes with 300 or 400 other people, my biology class was with like 50 other people. And coming from a smaller community, I think that worked well for me.
Yeah, I think that's something that maybe a lot of young people weren't aware that that's even an option. So thank you for sharing that very specific residential type situation at a big college. That's great.
Yeah, it was great. I had brunch the other day with a college friend, and so no regrets. As part of my college experience, I did undergraduate research, and I really loved it. So I was asking questions about how blood vessels work that nobody had asked before, and I got to publish those findings. And I won't say that they were really like headline catching things, but I really fell in love with science and with doing the scientific process. So in my junior year, I decided to go to graduate school where I earned a PhD in physiology. So a PhD is really a couple of years worth of coursework and then a really intensive research project called a dissertation. And so my dissertation, again, was on blood vessel function. And I looked at how salt in the diet affects how the blood vessels in your brain function. And blood vessels in your brain are really important because your brain needs lots of nutrients, right? but they're also really important because you want to direct those nutrients to, like right now, you want those nutrients to go to the parts of your brain involved in hearing and in seeing, but you're not so much involved in speaking right now, perhaps. And so in order to do that, the blood vessels need to change size. And I looked at kind of how that happens and how dietary salt can change that process. And it
Awesome.
was super lovely. But it turns out that people who do research often have to write a lot of grants in order to have the money to do that research. And I didn't feel like I was very good at asking people to pay me. I wanted people to just pay me because I was doing my job and showing up every day and producing results, right? I also learned about myself that I really like other people, and laboratory science is a little bit more um, a one-person sport than what I felt fulfilled doing. And so about halfway through graduate school, I decided that I wanted to go to medical school. And I wanted to go to medical school because medicine is definitely a team sport and there's a lot of personal interaction. But also, I felt like being able to do research, I really wanted the patient perspective. I wanted to make sure that the research questions I was asking aren't just things that I'm curious about, but are things that matter to patients and can improve their health and their well-being. And so I came back to Michigan and went to medical school at Michigan State. I did 2 years in Lansing and 2 years right here in Grand Rapids. And I made a lot of friends and I learned a lot. And so right here is my plug that you don't need to know at what your whole life is going to look like right now. But even when you're grown up and in your late 20s, you don't need to know what your life looks like. And if making up your mind about your career path makes sense to you, I was a better medical student because I took the time off and went to graduate school than I would have been at 22 going straight from college. Assuredly, I did better in school because I knew what I wanted in ways that I just didn't know about myself when I was 21. So at the end, in your third year of medical school is 4 years. In your third year, you kind of decide what kind of residency you want to do. And I didn't know because every time I did a new clinical rotation, I was convinced that that was the coolest thing in the world. And that's what I wanted to do. So I wanted to do surgery. I wanted to do internal medicine. I wanted to do family medicine. I wanted to do obstetrics and gynecology. I wanted to do pediatrics. And I was just like, oh my gosh, how am I going to make this choice? And then by happenstance, I heard a lecture on genetics and then I learned that you could do a combined pediatrics and genetics residency so that instead of 3 years of pediatrics and 2 years of genetics, it's basically 2 years and 2 years. And that seemed really cool for reasons that I'll get to in a little bit. So I matched, there's a match. I matched to residency at the Children's Hospital of Philadelphia on the East Coast. And I continued taking care of patients. And I did some very patient-centered research. This one is on a disorder called tyrosinemia type 1 and a very sick little baby. And then the other thing that I really want you to hear right now, because you might be saying, I don't know exactly all the math, but you've been in training for a long time at this point, and you're right. But life doesn't stop. So in the bottom, in the middle here, that's my baby shower in like very early, almost pandemic 2020. and a bunch of my co-residents. And so like life continues to go on. And it's a really beautiful thing. After residency, I did a 1-year fellowship in something called biochemical genetics. So that is genetic disorders related to how we metabolize our nutrients. I stayed at Philadelphia because I didn't feel like moving somewhere for a year, mostly. I had some great colleagues. I continued to do research. My older baby is on the right there. As you can see, she is a little bit of a diva. And then in the middle, that little guy is my second. So again, like life keeps going. And it's completely possible to do all the things that you want to do, like go to school and have a fulfilling career and have a family. It takes some juggling, but it's possible. And so last fall, I started what my family lovingly calls my first big kid job. I'll tell you that I started my first big kid job at the age of 36. And so I'm a medical and biochemical geneticist at Corewell Health and Helen DeVos Children's. And my job is a combination of patient care, teaching medical students, residents, other doctors, etc. And I still do patient-centered research. And so why genetics? I think rare disease is really cool. So these are two famous people with rare diseases. On the left is one of the actors from Stranger Things, and both he and his character on that show have a disorder called clinocranial dysplasia. So he doesn't have clavicles, which are your collarbones, and so you can find videos on YouTube that he can touch his shoulders together in the middle. And then also has some tooth differences and some other bony differences. So for a patient like him, I might diagnose him and then I might make medical recommendations based on that diagnosis. The gentleman on the right is a little bit ahead of your time. He is a playwright. He wrote Rent, and he had undiagnosed Marfan syndrome that is related to how he died in the 90s, 80s, somewhere in there. So you can see that these folks maybe look a little bit different, but not everyone I see with rare disease looks different. So I see kids with metabolic disorders. So on the right is a diagram of how folks with a disease called galactosemia can be affected. So galactosemia is an inappropriate metabolism of a sugar called galactose. When you drink milk and consume lactose, lactose is a glucose molecule and a galactose molecule put together. So these folks can't process galactose and can't process cow's milk, human milk, dairy of any kind. When they do, it can cause brain damage, eye differences, liver dysfunction, and kidney damage. And what's really beautiful is that every baby born in the United States gets tested for this when they're born. And if they have it, or we're worried that they have it, we can put them on a soy formula until we sort it out and help protect their brains and their livers and their kidneys. We also see a lot of kids with autism spectrum disorder. Kids with autism can look any number of ways, but we can identify a genetic cause for autism in about 1 in 3 cases. And so our evaluation of these kids is really deciding on appropriate genetic testing, doing that testing, and if we find a genetic reason for their autism, what does that mean? Are there other medical problems that we need to be looking out for? How can we best support their neurologic development? And so I think maybe I've already alluded to the reasons why I chose this career. And again, the things I love about this really didn't become clear to me until later. So it all starts with sort of knowing yourself and being confident about what you love. So I told you that I loved every rotation I did in medical school, and that was true. And the beauty of genetics is that I didn't have to choose a body system. I'm not a cardiologist. I'm not a GI specialist. I'm not a neurologist. I can see folks with differences in all of those organs. I also am pediatric trained, but it turns out that there aren't enough geneticists. And so I see patients of all ages. I am a pediatrician, but I'm not just a pediatrician. I see adults. I see patients as old as their 80s and 90s. And I get to follow them for their whole life, which is really cool. I take care of whole families, right? So the pedigree on the right of your screen is an example of how a disease that causes bleeding called hemophilia can be transmitted through a family. And so sometimes I care for whole families with the same disorder, but sometimes I care for whole families because you can't care for just one person without caring for their whole family. I get to learn something new about every day. All of this stuff is rare and it doesn't all exist in my brain. And so I have to go learn about it before I can make smart decisions about how to best care for patients or how to tell patients about what their diagnosis is. Folks with rare disease, it's a relatively underserved community. You can imagine that it's really frustrating to folks when their doctors tell them, oh, I've never heard of what you have. So being a voice who can say, yeah, I've heard of Marfan syndrome. Yeah, I've heard of clinocranial dysostosis. Yeah, I've heard of galactosemia. Here's what we're going to do about it, can be a breath of fresh air. And then I participate in team-based care. So my team includes doctors, nurses, the folks who pick up the phone. It includes social workers. It includes dietitians, right? That baby who can't drink milk, I need dietitians to help me make good choices for how they're going to still build healthy, strong bones and how they're going to have a well-balanced diet. I have genetic counselors. So genetic counselors weren't a career that I had heard of when I was your age, but genetic counselors train in genetics and they receive special training really focused on how to select the right genetic test, how to counsel patients on the implications of that test before the test is done, and then what the test means on the backside. And they really give incredibly personalized patient care and do a lot of in-depth discussion of those results because genetics can be really complicated. And then I have advanced practice providers who are nurse practitioners and physician's assistants. And so they function, honestly, much like I do. I just sort of like oversee them a little bit. And so that's my story as it exists today on the 17th of October in 2024. And I hope that if I were giving this talk 10 years from now, there would be another turn in my story or twist in my story. Hopefully not a U-turn.
Yeah, hopefully not a U-turn, but you've done a marvelous job of sharing your story and helping us kind of understand the process. I'll encourage people to put any questions they have in the chat, but I would love to take you back at that high school level when you were good with math and science, you were thinking pre-med. Tell the young people who are wondering, because they feel a lot of pressure to pick a major right now, right?
Mm-hmm.
And they don't necessarily know exactly what they want to do. So for something that they know maybe is in healthcare, is there a recommended undergrad? What kind of insights would you like to give them in these early decisions when they're 18?
Yeah. I think the hardest thing in the world is to know yourself, right? It is hard to be honest with yourself. But I think as you think about what comes next for you, think hard about what kind of environment do you learn best in? Do you want to go to a big university knowing that the advantages are that they have lots of resources and lots of different experiences and lots of ways that you could explore pre-med, lots of ways that you could explore health sciences, lots of ways that you could explore not health sciences, right? Like Michigan State has a huge plant biology department. I had never heard of plant biology, but you can make a lot of money, because people need plants and farmers need better ways to do what they do. So know what kind of environment you're looking for. Big universities have advantages, big universities have disadvantages, right? I didn't really have a career counselor at Michigan State. I could have, but I would have needed to initiate that, right? And so are you the kind of person who's going to be a real self-starter and advocate for yourself when you need additional resources? That was really hard for me to do, and I think I could have done better if I had developed those skills. I applied to Kalamazoo College, which is much smaller, and I still wonder about what life would be like if I had gone there, knowing that, perhaps I wouldn't have done the research that I did at Michigan State, but I probably would have had more academic support. And I still would have gotten an amazing undergraduate education.
Yeah.
Sometimes I think prerequisites get kind of a bad rap, but they're a really nice way to explore what you like and what you don't like. And so if you need an English credit, maybe consider taking something that sounds really interesting to you, if that fulfills the requirement, rather than just like the easy English class. Some of the best classes I took in my entire undergrad were actually for a bioethics minor. So I took a science and gender class, and I took a science and religion class, and they were so interesting, but I never would have thought about them otherwise.
Yeah, and certainly those bigger universities give you more options too. But
Yeah.
I guess I want to reinforce that residential college, because that was certainly some built-in support when you're living and taking classes with people. So that's a wonderful insight for today.
Yeah. So the residential colleges are a nice way to get some of that baked in.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I do want to just affirm too that the concept you just had about initiating, and I hope any young person that's watching this is affirmed in that they're exploring right now by watching something like this or participating in something like this. The more you ask questions and talk to people, you're going to be gleaning some tidbits that will help you with your decision. So it doesn't have to be a biology undergrad, does it, to go into med school? Tell us what you know about some of your peers and some other undergrad that they had when they.
Oh, there is truly no right major for going, honestly, to any graduate school. Now, you need to know that there are prerequisites, right? But I have a friend who I lived with in the dorm at Lyman Briggs. I don't remember exactly what her science major was, but she had a science major. She went to law school after undergrad, and she now works in science law policy. I think she's in DC, maybe for the government. I had friends in medical school who majored in all sorts of things. One of my best friends from medical school had a past life where she had gotten an undergraduate degree in like organizational behavior or something businessy. And I think she had her MBA, and then she went to medical school. So there is no better time than right now. Medical schools are figuring out that they want a diverse class. And that diverse class doesn't just mean what we look like or where we came from. It means a diverse class of ideas. And they're learning that recruiting a bunch of science majors like creates a really lopsided workforce. And that folks who major in English or theater or I don't know, engineering, like make they have different skills and they have different strengths, and some of those make really good doctors. And the same is true not just of medical school, but of every professional school. So they'll still have prereqs, but those prereqs are much, much smaller than the number of credits you need for a major. There are also post-baccalaureate programs. So you can major in whatever you want, and maybe it takes you a little bit of time to decide that I want to go to medical school, and you finish your degree in English and you haven't done all of the prereqs. There are programs you apply to that are 1 year. They're intense, but they're designed to get you all the prereqs you need and to support you through the medical school application process. And so I think that there are more of those now than there have ever been before. So truly, it's not too late. It's all about you figuring out what you want and working towards that goal.
So helpful, Jessie, for sure. And one thing, we have about 3 minutes left, so I'm going to ask you one more quick question and then have you share kind of a final word of wisdom. You've given so much already, but lifelong learning, it sounds, is definitely a trait about you. And is there anything just of what you've learned in your career of what kids can maybe hear are some good traits to be a physician and a geneticist, that maybe they can do some self-assessment, like, oh, I'm a problem solver. I do like to know the why. What are some other just kind of general traits that you've noticed maybe are good ones to be a physician?
Yeah. I think about the traits that you want in your physicians, right? You want a good listener. You want someone who can take really complicated, really scary things and make them less complicated. Like, you want to be able to understand what's going on with your health. And when it's appropriate, you want those things to not be as scary as they are when you Google them, right? So computers are really smart. We all know that AI could do 80% of our jobs. AI cannot make people feel better. Maybe it will someday, but that's really, I think, as a physician, we are healers, and healers don't mean curers, and healers don't mean fixers, but we do have some role in making people feel a little bit better. So think about the kinds of qualities that you would want in someone caring for you or your loved ones. I think also like curiosity. I think some tolerance for there not being a right answer. If you're a right answer person, which I definitely am, but I'm recovering, it turns out that of the 8 billion people on the planet, there are 8 billion different ways that bodies can be. And so if you're looking for a right answer, sometimes that's a problem. And then I would just say, like, what brings you joy? Because I don't know about you, but I don't want to show up to work and not feel joy. And it's not that every part of my day is puppies and rainbows, but at the end of the day, I come home and I feel like I've done something good for the world. And I think finding whatever that is for you, even if that's writing plays, even if that's going to genetic counseling school. There are a million different ways to manifest good in the world. And I think each and every one of you are going to find your way doing that.
Oh, Jessie, awesome career mentor for us today. Thank you for sharing your time. It's 4 o'clock already. It went so fast. But you shared so much good information, and I hope the educators on this call will share this with their students, and students that you're inspired to keep doing some research, checking out opportunities where you can develop your portfolio of just experiences to learn about yourself. So thank you, Jessie.
It was my pleasure. Good luck, everybody.